If there's one game that made history in the dark RPG genre, it was Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. And now, years later, the sequel is finally on its way. But will it deliver everything the fans expect? Today I'm going to list 7 things that every fan wants to see in Bloodlines 2. And look, one of them is going to spark a lot of discussion. What always made Vampire the Masquerade so remarkable as a tabletop RPG was the depth of role-playing. When we sat at the table, the focus was never just on numbers or combat, but on who the character is within that dark universe. The vampire's moral identity, existential dilemmas, and even the way they deal with their own monstrosity are the heart of this game. In Bloodlines 2, I hope to see this essence captured faithfully, as a respect to the original way of playing, more about interpretation than action. In the RPG, the atmosphere revolves around choices that have no easy answers. You act not just to win, but to mean something. I want to feel that in the game's missions, in conversations with NPCs, and in the way the world reacts to my decisions. Fidelity here isn't a technical matter. It's emotional and philosophical. The player who understands Vampire knows they are not the hero. They are a creature trying to survive in a world where power and humanity clash constantly. The tabletop system has this magic of making the player reflect on themselves and what they're doing. There is no right or wrong. There is the cost of your actions. If Bloodlines 2 can bring this kind of narrative depth, the game will be more than a sequel. It will be an experience worthy of the name. Fidelity to the RPG isn't about repeating rules, but about preserving the feeling of the shared narrative. The setting helps a lot in this aspect. In the tabletop RPG, playing in a chronicle is living inside a world that molds to your actions. That's what I want to feel. A living city, a society that watches and reacts. I want choices to have real weight, for resources to be scarce and relationships to be dangerous. I want the player to feel part of something bigger, as if they were inside a plot that only happens because they exist. It's also essential that every clan, every faction, and every individual respects their origin, just like in the RPG. This fidelity builds credibility for the universe. When we know the philosophy of the Malkavians or the manipulative power of the Ventru, it's not just aesthetics and its meaning. Every behavior and decision should reflect the ideology that comes from the tabletop game system. That's what separates a generic game from a true vampire. Furthermore, the music, the rhythm, and the silence play a narrative role. In the RPG, moments of pause are as important as actions. The sound of the night and the rhythm of a conversation can say more about the characters than any cutscene. This fidelity to the sensory experience is also part of what makes Vampire what it is, a story told in tones of silence and secrets. In the end, what I want from Bloodlines 2 is the same thing I felt in the best tabletop RPG sessions. That mix of fascination and discomfort, of living something intense, dangerous, and mysterious. Fidelity isn't imitation, it's translation. And if the game can translate this essence, it will become a respectable work within the world of darkness. For every Bloodlines fan, the connection to the original 2004 game is an almost sacred element. It's that invisible line that ties together the memories and feelings we had when we first ventured into the dark streets of Los Angeles, with its unique atmosphere and narrative freedom. Bloodlines 2 carries this responsibility on its shoulders, as it's not just a sequel, but an attempt to revive an RPG icon that marked an entire generation. It's understandable that nostalgia causes anxiety. After all, the original had that cultural baggage that only years of cult following can create, and that's never easy to repeat with the same intensity. At the same time, Bloodlines 2 makes conscious choices to differentiate itself, like the presence of a fixed protagonist and a more structured narrative. This can be a double-edged sword for those who love the chaotic freedom of the first game. On one hand, it brings a more cohesive and polished story. On the other, it limits that feeling of creating your own path and identity within the vampiric world. However, the setting in Seattle, a scene equally laden with secrets and vampire politics, keeps the soul of the series intact. A place that breathes the dark world, full of intrigue and warring factions. Another essential point in the connection is the return of the typical clans from the Vampire, the Masquerade universe, although with changes in the playable roster. This choice signals a balance between respecting the original canon and the renewal necessary for a modern game, even if fans miss the wide variety of clans from the first title. The special inclusion of the Malkavian clan in a parallel narrative demonstrates respect for the most iconic and controversial elements of the original, and serves to deepen the world without losing the complexity that made Bloodlines a classic. I see this connection not just as a direct reproduction of what already existed, but as a bridge that tries to honor the past while building a new legacy. Many players asked for a resurrection of the original style, but playing Bloodlines 2 is an experience that should be judged on its own, with its own rules, but in a universe that clearly reverberates with echoes of that beloved first game. I have hope that the atmospheric impact, the density of the lore, and the dark tone will manage to bring back that feeling. From a more personal point of view, I remember the sense of discovery and freedom of the original Bloodlines, something that hardly any game can capture in the same way. Bloodlines 2 doesn't seek to be an exact copy, which would be almost impossible, but rather a reinvention that tries to connect through fidelity to the universe and the dark spirit of vampires, with complex characters and political conflict, flavors that every fan wants to see. For me, that's enough to keep the desire to dive into this new adventure alive, even knowing that the structure has changed. Moreover, the game's development by the Chinese Room, known for their atmospheric construction and dense narratives, gives some comfort to those who, like me, desire a deep connection with the atmosphere of the original. Even if the gameplay is more polished and less chaotic, it's a bet on visceral and immersive storytelling that should please fans looking not only for nostalgia, but also for an evolution in the way the story is told. Finally, I believe the connection to the original in Bloodlines 2 is not simply a matter of direct references or clone mechanics, but a commitment to the essence of a dark, fragmented universe, full of secrets and moral choices, where the player must navigate between the human and the monstrous with a sense of moral ambiguity that only Bloodlines can deliver. This is the true connection every fan wants, and it's exactly what keeps my interest alive for this release. Regarding the main story of Bloodlines 2, what every fan really wants is to be sucked into a dense plot, full of twists and depth that fits perfectly into that dark and political vampire universe. The promise of a more structured narrative, with a fixed protagonist named Fire, brings high expectations for the character's development and her journey, something that might make immersion easier for those who enjoy more focused and personalized stories. This, to me, sounds like an attempt to create a strong narrative experience, capable of keeping the player emotionally engaged from beginning to end. The fact that the story is split between two protagonists, Fire in contemporary Seattle, and Fabienne in an alternate 1920s timeline, is, in my opinion, a bold choice that could enrich the narrative if well executed. This creates an interesting duality where two vampiric worlds intertwine, expanding the mythology and offering different perspectives on the same universe. I, personally, think this approach can help break the pace without making the plot tiresome, inserting mystery and suspense in a balanced measure. One of the most promising points of the main plot is the political and social backdrop involving the weakening of the Camarilla, the disputes between factions, and the presence of a new inquisition that hunts supernatural beings. This echoes the dark, intense tone of the original, bringing an environment charged with danger and betrayal, where every decision has real weight. After all, Bloodlines has always been much more than a simple vampire RPG. It's a chronicle about power, control, and survival in a world that doesn't accept monsters in the light of day. I feel that for the main story to work fully, it's essential that the player's choices have a real impact, and that the plot doesn't become a linear and predictable path. Although Bloodlines 2 seems more structured, I hope it doesn't sacrifice the freedom that gave the first game its personality. The narrative needs to be engaging precisely because of its ability to adapt to each player's style, creating memorable and different experiences with each playthrough. I also see great potential in the development of secondary characters, especially the leaders of the clans and factions, who should offer quests that deepen the main story and expand the politics of the vampiric world. A plot as robust as this, one only gains strength with well-constructed personalities, impactful dialogues, and conflicts that challenge the player to navigate the gray morality of the Bloodlines universe. This is, without a doubt, the ingredient that excites me the most. Finally, my hope is that Bloodlines 2 delivers a plot that can combine suspense, drama, and moral dilemmas at a pace that holds the player's attention from beginning to end, promoting an emotional and intellectual experience. For me, this is the essence of any memorable RPG. A main story that not only entertains but also makes the player think and feel part of a world that pulses, bleeds, and breathes mystery, exactly what every fan expects from a title that has Bloodlines in its name. The first Bloodlines created an atmosphere that is still hard to match today. That tone of urban decay, the neon cutting through the darkness, and the distant sounds of the dead city formed an almost hypnotic immersion. In the second game, This visual and emotional identity needs to return, not as a copy, but as an evolution of the same spirit. The setting in a vampire game isn't just scenery, it's personality. I want to see a city that breathes conspiracy, where every neighborhood has a story and every character carries secrets. In the tabletop RPG, the setting is almost an active participant in the narrative, and Bloodlines 2 needs to treat the environment the same way. A cold, living, and silently threatening world. Think of the iconic places from the first game. The Santa Monica Pier at night, the Asylum Club, the wet alleys of downtown. Everything there made you feel that the city was more than a backdrop. It was a trap. The second game must deliver this same feeling, but with new technologies, light effects, dynamic weather, organic sounds that change with your actions. The city needs to have a soul. Atmosphere is also about pace. Bloodlines 2 can't be too frantic, because Vampire is about contemplation. The city should feel empty and dense at the same time, making you feel that something is always watching.
The setting has to carry that characteristic loneliness, the kind of silence that makes you reflect on what you've become.
Every scene should tell a silent story. A forgotten piece of graffiti, a conversation between humans on the street, a distant song. These details create the kind of immersion that no high-quality graphics can replace. It's the way the world looks at you and reminds you that you no longer belong there. I want to feel that on every corner. And also, I want the world to be hostile, not in difficulty, but in feeling. In the RPG, the city is a predator as much as the vampires are. In Bloodlines 2, the environment needs to cause discomfort, with a contrast between luxury and abandonment. May the exuberant buildings hide rot, and may the alleys bring more honesty than the halls of power. Lastly, the setting should remind you that the night is eternal. I want to see the moon as an motionless witness, the urban noises mixed with the throb of hunger. If Paradox manages to recreate this feeling, it will not only respect the original, it will transcend it. Bloodlines 2 should be a living, sad, and fascinating city, one that you fear to leave and fear to explore at the same time. Creating a vampire in Vampire the Masquerade is a ritual. In the tabletop RPG, you don't just choose a clan and attributes, you shape the character's soul. In Bloodlines 2, I want a customization system that goes far beyond appearance, one that makes me feel like the author of a complex and imperfect creature. The choice of clan must be decisive, not just aesthetic. Each one reflects a philosophy, a way of surviving eternity. A Malkavian doesn't see the world the same way a Toreador does, and a Nosferatu lives a marginalization that changes their entire experience. I want the game to translate this difference into gameplay and narrative, with NPC reactions, mission paths, and unique dilemmas. The RPG has always allowed players to create eccentric, contradictory, and even self-destructive characters. This freedom needs to exist here. I want to be able to be an erudite and introspective vampire, or an impulsive and brutal predator, without the game judging me for it. The choices should reflect a lifestyle, not combat efficiency. Another important layer is visual construction. It's not just about creating a pretty face, but an identity. The look needs to be in dialogue with the clan and the player. Clothes, marks, style. Aesthetics are part of the immersion and should change as the character moves away from humanity. A good customization system makes the player recognize themselves in the creature they've created. Progression should also be customizable. I want the growth to reflect moral decisions, how much I've given in to the beast, how much I've held on to my humanity. May each developed discipline tell a story. The tabletop RPG does this perfectly, and it would be incredible to see Bloodlines 2 apply these narrative nuances to customization. Not every character needs to journey through power. Some might get lost in addiction or guilt. An open system allows for this and reinforces the philosophical side of the game. The player needs to feel that every point invested is a confession about who they've become. This is true customization, turning mechanics into meaning. And above all, customization should allow for creating vampires with a soul. Something that goes beyond appearance or stats. I want to see characters that feel real, full of conflicts, vanities, ambitions, and fears. Because in the end, that's what makes Vampire special. It's not about blood monsters, but about humans condemned to live forever. Bloodlines 2 cannot settle for basic progression systems. In a game where everything revolves around power and morality, the mechanics need to be dense, organic, and flexible. I want an RPG that challenges me, that forces me to think before I act, and that rewards experimentation. The first Bloodlines had this in its essence. Playing with different clans changed everything. Approach, speech style, relationship with the world. I want to see this principle expanded, a system that recognizes my actions and adapts to my playstyle. May each discipline have multiple applications, both physical and social. May the RPG force you to be creative, not just strong. Mechanical depth also involves risk. In Vampire, power comes at a price, and the game needs to make that clear. Using abilities in public places must have consequences. Choosing to solve something with violence must close political doors. A true RPG doesn't reward you for being effective. It punishes you for not being careful. Progression needs to be non-linear. Disciplines, gifts, and weaknesses should intertwine, creating a mechanical personality. I want a game that makes me reflect on the kind of creature I'm becoming as I level up. May development have a narrative impact and not just be about accounting. In terms of balance, the secret is to let the player feel powerful and vulnerable at the same time. Bloodlines 2 needs to respect the duality of vampires, predators on the outside, but chaotic on the inside. A good system shows strengths and weaknesses without masking them. It makes you feel glorious and condemned in equal measure. Missions should use the mechanics intelligently, allowing for multiple approaches. Combat, dialogue, manipulation, stealth. Everything should be viable depending on who you've created. This freedom defines a true RPG. In the end, what I want is a system that makes me grow not only in power, but in identity. May the game force me to define who I am in the world of darkness and what limits I am willing to cross. Without this, Bloodlines 2 runs the risk of becoming just another action game. With it, it could become one of the best modern translations of a classic RPG. This topic is sensitive and much discussed among fans. The clans are the essence of diversity in Vampire the Masquerade. Each one represents a philosophy, a way of facing the curse and eternity. Leaving some out would be like mutilating the original universe. Even if this is technically difficult, the game needs to find a worthy way to represent them all. In the tabletop RPG, choosing a clan is the first important decision. It's where the player defines how they behave, what kind of powers they use, and what kind of vampire they want to be. Taking this choice away partially or restricting it to future DLC would be a betrayal to the community. Fidelity here is essential. Bloodlines 2 needs to allow everyone to enter this world the way they wish. I understand that balancing the clans is complex. Each has distinct abilities and weaknesses, and some require completely different gameplay approaches. But that's also what makes Vampire so special. Inequality is part of the experience. It shows that the world of darkness is not fair. It's cruel and hierarchical by nature. If the game has the courage to include them all, even if gradually, it will gain the fans' trust. Seeing Malkavians, Nosferatu, Gangrel, Bruja, and Tremere coexisting is a celebration of the original lore. It's the kind of detail that shows the team truly understands the material they're adapting. The danger lies in turning clans into paid additional content. This would be a low blow for those who value the RPG. In the tabletop game, clans are a narrative option, not a product. Limiting this would be disrespecting a part of the most loyal audience who have kept the story of Vampire alive for decades. The presence of all clans also brings narrative variety. Each playthrough becomes unique. Each conversation has new nuances. The game's replayability depends on this, being able to relive the story from different perspectives and moralities. Without this breadth, Bloodlines 2 runs the risk of seeming smaller than the universe it represents. Therefore, my opinion is clear. Bloodlines 2 needs to be bold. Including all the clans is more than content. It's respect. It's giving a voice to all the faces of eternity, and showing that being a vampire is a plural concept, full of contradictions and secrets. If the game does this, it not only satisfies fans, it honors the entire legacy of the franchise.